You're watching In Search of Fun.
What's up, everybody? I hope this finds you all having a wonderful day. Welcome to both In Search of Fun and Barely Qualified Picks as we do our first crossover brand collaboration in talking about what might be the second best show of 2025, Chad Powers on Hulu. I am so excited to talk about it. I am just equally as excited to be doing that with my brother and one of my favorite people in the whole world, JC. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I love being on the show, all the episodes we've done, and I cannot wait to talk about Chad Powers. But first, if this is the second best show, what do you have as the best show of the year? I'm very... Okay.
Task is my best show of the year. If you haven't seen Task, and look, I understand if HBO Prestige TV isn't for everyone. I am an HBO Prestige TV nut, and Task for me was the best HBO Prestige television that I've seen in several years. Mark Ruffalo just got to my very core. The character development, like every episode just had me on edge. It was excellent. I actually went back and watched every episode twice. I watched it and then I listened to some podcasts about it, and man, there were just so many different angles and plot lines, and even the one plot line I didn't like throughout, the way that they tied it all together at the end, it was like, yeah, actually, I'm really glad that you guys committed to that and you didn't do what I had wished for most of the season and just bail and spend that time on.
All right, I'll have to check it out. We also have Stranger Things and Fallout coming, so it's a loaded year and a loaded fall for TV.
John, you're going to hate me for this. I have not seen past season 1 of Stranger Things, and as somebody who has worked in the video game industry for 15 years and has played many Fallout games and has a deep appreciation for Fallout, it's been on my list. I just haven't watched it.
Well, you are a Walter Goggins fan, Mr. Uncle Baby
Well, who
Billy.
isn't, right? I have season tickets to Walter Goggins, right? At this point, who isn't a Walter Goggins fan? And yes, like anything he's in, I will watch. I will at least give it a shot.
It's great. Highly recommend. I'm not going to spoil anything. Go into it eyes wide open. It's going to be great. You're going to love it.
All right, John, let's talk about Chad Powers. You and I have been talking about Chad Powers behind the scenes for weeks and weeks now. We've been talking about doing this. At first, it was like, do we cover the first couple episodes? And I think life happened. And I'm actually really glad in hindsight that we didn't break it up and try and tackle it as it went, but that we get to talk about the whole season in one fell swoop today. And for everybody's awareness, this is spoilers heavy. We're not going to hold anything back. We're assuming that you've seen it. If you haven't seen it, stop now. Go watch it. The one thing I don't like is they're 30-minute episodes, but for your sake, if you pay for no ads with Hulu, you can rip through this and then come right back to the podcast and join us for the discussion. But again, this is a spoilers heavy discussion. And with that, we're going to break it down into a few pillars. Well, 6. First, we're going to talk about what the show is. What kind of show is this? Who's the main talent? When and how did it hit our respective radars? Because that's an interesting one. We're going to talk about our favorite characters and story arcs. There are so many great characters in this show, and there are a lot of different individual character-to-character story arcs to dive into. Some of our favorite scenes, plot lines, and quotes. I've got my 10 favorite. Would love to hear how those stack up for you and if there are any that I missed. And then we can do some half-baked season 2 prognostications. At first it seemed like, first this was an Eli Manning skit, right? And then it seemed like this might be a one-season show. And now we know after the season finale, there is going to be a season 2, and there are a lot of questions about what's going to happen in season 2. And then we'll wrap it up with a sports show ranking discussion. Where does this fall against the other great sports shows over the last
some really good ones
15,
in there
20
too.
years? There's some really good ones. I sent you the list and my rankings beforehand, so you've had time to think and respond. And then finally, we're going to give the show a rating and a recommendation. Cool?
Sounds great. Let's dive in.
All right. John, the premise of this show, it's a college football show, right? Like we talked about Eli Manning, former NFL quarterback, but before he was in the NFL, he was at Ole Miss as one of the most heralded college quarterbacks in the country. He had a great career at Ole Miss, never won anything major, but still a great career. And obviously it really stuck with him because he made the show about a college football experience in the SEC.
Well, and the interesting thing is all of these schools that they play, their opponents, they're all SEC schools. So one thing that I'm really curious about is who do we think South Georgia is supposed to represent? Because it could be a number of teams. We know that
it's not a team, right? It's like what band of the SEC are they meant to represent, right? In theory.
I just assumed it was Mississippi State because it was Eli Manning, and it was kind of him taking a dig at the Egg Bowl rival where there is some history there. They, in theory, should be competing for college football playoffs with their recruiting grounds, kind of adjusting to what the modern day NIL is. Like, that's just the way I mentally took it. But I think you're right.
I think you're right. I think they are a model of Mississippi State.
Or it could be Kentucky, or it could be any number of those teams that they're kind of that B list, like without Chad Powers, they would be a doormat. But this is one of those interesting things too. They're competitive with all of these games. And I don't want to jump into too many spoilers, but that tells me they have a defense. That tells me they have a running game, because you can have a superstar quarterback, but without those other elements, without a defense, you can have Cam Newton, but if every single game is a 55-54 shootout, eventually you're going to have bounces of the ball that are unlucky. You need to have complete games.
Absolutely. I do think, though, that it is more like a Mississippi State. I think your original thought was right, that in the state of Georgia, like the state of Kentucky, there is no second SEC school. There's no big brother, little brother. Like in Kentucky, yeah, in basketball, Kentucky and Louisville, right? But not in football. Whereas if you look at Alabama, the state of Alabama is Alabama and Auburn. When you look at Mississippi, you have Mississippi and Mississippi State. Florida, you've got a bunch of schools, right? The Carolinas as well. There's a lot of those rivalries. So I think you're spot on. I do think it's meant to be what I would call a tier 3 SEC school. If you think about the S tier schools, right? Those S tier schools, Bama, Georgia, at one time Florida, but today, Bama, Georgia, and then normally LSU. If you have any questions about whether LSU thinks it's an S-tier school, go look up Governor Landry's comments on the matter. And then you have the tier 1 schools, those schools that can really jump up. Like I think Ole Miss is a tier 1 school at this point. I think Auburn is, they're struggling right now, but they are a tier 1 school. Like when they have a good coach, and I mean, they have all of the money that they need. They're in a fertile recruiting situation. But then I think there are those tier 2 schools like the Mississippi States, like the Kentuckys. I think Vanderbilt used to even be a tier 3 school. Are they a tier 2 school now? Hard to say. But however you shake out that tier, that's where South Georgia is. They are, Coach Hudson, who we'll talk about in a second. There's a moment in the show where they show, one of the walls, and he was the 2016 National Coach of the Year. So to your point, they have resources. They've won. They're not a complete doormat, and they're winning this year.
Yeah. Just a random thought that popped up. They don't have the legacy in the SEC, but where would you put Oklahoma and Texas in that rankings?
Well, Texas and Oklahoma, to me, are both tier 1 schools, like clear tier 1 schools. It's been a long time since either one has been an S-tier school. I think when you go back to the Bob Stoops days of Oklahoma, when he and Josh Heupel won a national title together, when he won another one with, Jason White. Anybody who goes to an Oklahoma Sooners game is going to come upon this massive statue of Jason White and go, who the hell is that? It's Jason White. And there was a stretch there where Oklahoma was as powerful as any team in the country. And of course, they have decades of legacy. So you can't put them in the tier 2, but they're also not an S-tier school right now. Like, let's be really honest with ourselves. Do we think that they're recruiting head to head with Bama? Like, if a recruit has a choice between Georgia, Bama, and Oklahoma, are they going to look at Oklahoma in the same class? I don't think so. And so I don't think we should either. Texas is Texas. And, maybe it's the way I grew up, but I still remember Vince Young and the USC game and all those things. And Texas is still a tier 1 program to me. And I think, you look, Texas is arrow pointed up.
Multiple
right
playoff
now.
berths in the last handful of years, too. So it's hard not to think of them in that tier. I agree with you.
All right, so coming back here, we've got the South Georgia Catfish. I hate the mascot, but they're the South Georgia Catfish, and those waters run deep, as you see on all the walls in the stadium.
I love the amount of thought that they put into these little pieces of the environment, the atmosphere, where it all comes together. The fact that their mascot's name is Whiskers, which is absolutely what you would name a catfish mascot. Like, the amount of just detail they put into it is a tier above.
Now I've got to tell you, and you've worked in entertainment for a long time too now. And you sometimes have situations where you have executive producers who are in name only. They're getting paid, but they're not really offering anything. Like I can think of some products that we've put out that had executive producers that didn't do a whole lot behind the scenes. In this case, Eli and Peyton Manning, I think, are to credit for so many of the little bits of authenticity that you see. I was reading an article just the other day where they were talking about how they saw Glenn Powell trying to take a quarterback snap and the shotgun had his palms up and they said, this will never do. We can't destroy the credibility and authenticity of the show by him not knowing how to take a snap. And they actually went and worked with him on it. And I think that is a microcosm of the level of effort and attention to detail that went into the show. And it shows, you're right.
It's huge. I also loved Eli has a cameo at the very end of the second episode, if I'm recalling this correctly. And it cracked me up because this is his baby and you see that he wants this to survive. And, this is one of those things where when I saw an ad for Chad Powers and the tagline is, I'm going to do a Mrs. Doubtfire, I was like, this is about to be some hot garbage. But I had just watched Twisters. I'm sitting here thinking about Top Gun Maverick, and I'm thinking Glenn Powell wouldn't just take a cash grab TV show. So there's got to be more to this.
And, and I just love college football. So they were going to get me for an episode. And I think for a lot of people, they were going to get him for an episode, and they did a great job. And so let's talk about that. The premise of the show, like we said, college football, you've got former Oregon Duck washout. That stung a little bit. The whole show opening up with Oregon losing a national championship. And I understand that they're setting the stage for this is the hardest way for a player to end a game, to end a season, to end their college career.
Did it have to be the Ducks, though?
Did it have to be the Ducks?
Did it have to be the Ducks? You and I were in the stadium for Michael Dyer. And we looked at each other and said,
he shouldn't have been in the stadium because he was academically ineligible, by the way. But he was.
We looked at each other and said, well, it's going to be a long field goal. The Ducks are going to have a little bit of time. Nope. It was not a long field goal. And then for this one, I remember texting you like, oh, cool, he's a Duck. And then I think you just let me go through the stream of consciousness via text of, oh, no. Uh-oh. This looks like, but it has to be, great. It had to be that way. And then
my buddy David, who's a Beaver fan, he watched the opening and he immediately texted our group text and said, this is the greatest show I've ever seen. And that just only stung even more. So getting back to it, we've got Oregon Ducks washout Russ Holiday, who is played by a stellar Glenn Powell. He hatches a plan 8 years removed from that catastrophic Rose Bowl to regain his gridiron glory by taking on an entirely new persona with the help of Danny, the team mascot Whiskers, and then going on to win an open tryout for the South Georgia Catfish. So to your point, you alluded to this earlier. For all the things that they apparently have, how in the hell are they doing an open tryout for a quarterback? But whatever, they were. The Catfish are led by Coach Hudson, who is played by lovable that guy Steve Zahn, who loses his athletic director to start the show. So his hot seat becomes incredibly hot right out of the gate. And he is obviously a leading coach in Next Coach Fired. So are we going to be talking about him next week in the fictitious barely qualified picks? Maybe. But he is very keen to try and save his job amid a bunch of personal turmoil. And of course, Chad Powers is this incredibly quirky character. He creates this wild canon for himself.
Because he's doing it all on the fly.
Ridiculous accents all on the fly. And then, of course, we don't get too far into the season before things start to crumble.
Well, and I love, there's a moment very early on in the season where Danny says and addresses kind of everybody going along with this, where he's like, everything you say we have to document because it is the canon of Chad Powers. And it's all these little things that you have Danny, who is there and he's this guy who loves makeup and he's the team mascot. He's with the cheerleaders. So, he gets all of that, but
beautiful singing voice,
but he's voicing all of the thoughts that you as a viewer would typically be thinking of, like, really or Chad Powers is from this rural town and he was homeschooled and he's, barely ever played and all these things. And Danny's losing his mind because he has to help Russ, Glenn and the actor, make sure that he's not tripping up over himself.
Glenn, who is Russ, who is Chad Powers.
Yes, I'm the dude playing the dude disguised as another dude. To quote one of the other great movies of all times. Yeah. So it's just little things that
John,
add
I
up.
want to get into the characters, and I want to talk about Danny a little bit, because I actually like a question that I want to pose for Danny is, does Danny actually want to find a way to make this whole thing work, or does Danny want to build this thing up to be the biggest burnout ever so that Danny gets on Dubois? But we'll come back to that in a second. Before we start getting into the characters and the plot lines and all of that, I want to give credit to the producers for building what you and I have discussed behind the scenes is a well-done sports dramedy. This could have been, and in many cases when they make sports shows, there's like the sports show, part of the sports show, and they put effort into authenticity in that, and then there's the drama, and the two oftentimes feel like oil and water. This was a beautifully blended sports dramedy, reinforced by the fact that there are actually 2 out of 6 episodes in which Chad never takes the field. You put me onto that, and I hadn't thought about that. The fact that, they focused in 33% of the season on anything but on-field football.
I would actually take it a step further. I don't believe he throws a pass in those 2 episodes. So it's nothing. It's all character development. And it's all things that, like, there are a lot of shows where random hijinks happen and something terrible is going to happen and they need to go chase this, that, or the other. But it's like, it's all within the realm of possibility. You don't have to suspend disbelief that much to go along with these storylines. And it's just done in such a thoughtful way. Like, huge credit to the writers in how they've set these things up.
And you're right. How the writers have sort of preempted but that doesn't make sense, thoughts that you would have by saying the thing out loud, but not doing it in a way that, in many shows, it's like, oh, they're doing the thing where they're saying it out loud so we don't miss it. Yeah, exactly. So anyways, I agree with you. Huge credit to them. The one nip that I will pick with this show is that, boy, it hit our radar felt like 5 years ago. And then we were waiting for it forever. And having been in video games, like, you have these pre-order windows. And sometimes they're so long that, a game gets announced and then it's essentially forgotten about by the time it gets close to the game actually releasing, and then you have to do it all over again. I do wonder if they would have had better reach and stickiness with the people that they did gain awareness from if they didn't have such a long burn in the lead up to the show actually releasing.
I mean, I saw this, I think spring is when it popped up on my radar. And the trailers and everything made me think it was right around the corner. And so I was expecting it to drop any day. And then we had a handful of other shows in between now and then. I mean, Stick came and went in the time that I saw that first episode or that first trailer. And then I actually watched a full episode. So it's one of those things where it caught me off guard that it was actually releasing in the fall. And yeah, it makes sense. Like, now that college football is here, now that our eyes are thinking about football, this show's going to come out. But where was like the marketing blitz? Kind of in
Agreed.
August and September?
I mean, you and I are addicted to football. Like, I would have thought that it would have been in my face all the time. And I'm not going to say that I never saw anything, because I might have, but it certainly didn't register. It took me going into Hulu, and then it was there 2 episodes in. It was like, oh my gosh, Chad Powers, it's here. I wonder if it's any good.
I was 3 episodes had already released by the time I got around to it, because I just didn't realize. And then once I watched that first episode, I watched all 4 episodes, maybe in one sitting, maybe not, but very close to it. And then for episodes 5 and 6, because it is a tight 6 episodes, I really appreciate that about the show. And we're going to talk about cliffhangers and all of those things, but I was waiting every single, I think they came out on Tuesdays, every morning on
Monday
Tuesday.
nights.
Okay, Monday nights. I watched them
Monday night at 9 p.m. Although I will say, Hulu, so strict about the 9 p.m. I'd be on there at like 8:45 p.m. Pacific time, because every other service does it on Eastern time. And I'd be on there and it'd be like, no, you need to wait until 9 p.m. It's like, geez, Louise,
9
you guys.
at the button. Yep.
At the button. All right, John, let's talk about characters. There are a handful of key characters. There is no running back, as you mentioned, but we'll set that aside. I'm going to run through the characters, and I'm going to give a brief description from my perspective, and then I want you to correct any perspectives that you have, or not correct, but share any additional different perspectives that you have on the characters. But then ultimately, I want to know, who are your 2 favorite characters and your 1 least favorite character. So obviously there's Chad. Chad Powers goes from asshole winner at Oregon to asshole loser in life to humbled human at South Georgia, but maybe not entirely humbled because he never really takes accountability for what happened in the Rose Bowl. Like, is he an anti-hero or is he a bad guy becoming a hero? Then we've got Danny. We talked about Danny. He is the team mascot. He is Dumois Dreamin', US Weekly, People Magazine. Is he truly a benevolent and well-intended friend? Or does he secretly anticipate the crash that can get he and Russ on Dumois and into US Weekly? So Danny is the second character. The third character is Coach Hudson, obviously 2016 Coach of the Year, but currently embattled. He just lost his athletic director. He's facing the NIL realities that coaches in real life are facing and struggling with. Dabo Swinney, anyone? And then you've got his daughter, Coach Ricky, who's the ultimate boys club challenger and Chad's not so secret admirer. But like, is she jealous? And we'll talk about how Ricky comes to find out about Chad's fraud. But there's a part of me that's like, does Ricky look at that and go, I wish I had thought about that? And then we've got Tricia, who is the classic NIL booster in the NIL era. She is the foul-mouthed, off-color, but so quick to turn the tables on anybody that she's engaged with. We'll talk about Tricia more for sure. She just knows how to pull all the strings in her favor. And then we've got Jerry. Three characters left. Jerry, the God-fearing, God-first player archetype, the Tim Tebow type. Who can't throw the ball, maybe he can run the ball, but he knows the playbook back and forth. Is Jerry at the end of the season a villain or a hero or something in between? And then finally, two throwaway characters for me, Coach Dobbs and Coach Bird. Coach Bird, a little bit funnier as the quarterback coach and, former South Georgia star who's actually kind of an idiot. Coach Bird, who's like the very thoughtful offensive coordinator. You just don't get a lot from him. So those are the players to me. I don't think I'm really missing any key characters, but did anything jump out as I described those that, you feel needs to be added?
So one thing that jumped out to me that hadn't really dawned on me until you mentioned that there's no running back. We only really meet two of Chad's teammates. You mentioned Jerry, who is kind of the career backup, right? He's physically, this is their word, not mine. He's physically retarded, but Chad is the mentally retarded quarterback, and there's a fun line that you're going to address a little bit later. But like, he's undersized. Going back
to the movie that you referenced earlier, he does not ever go full retard.
He doesn't, which is good.
He gets close.
He certainly does. But no, the other character is the star wide receiver who's probably going to be a third or a fourth round pick who wants a quarterback that can get him a 1,000-yard season. He's the only other teammate whose name we learn and who is invested in who the quarterback is and has a personality. All the other teammates are kind of throwaway where it's like, okay, that one's an offensive lineman, that one's a defensive lineman, that one might be a tight end who will catch a ball, but they really only highlight personality of those two. When it comes to the other assistant coaches besides Coach Ricky, I will say, we don't really learn who Coach Beard is and Ted Lasso until season 2 or 3, so we can give them some time. But yeah, with Tricia, the rules don't apply to her, and she knows it. And she mentions that a couple times where she's told, hey, you can't smoke in here. And she says, I think, darling, I can smoke anywhere I want to. And nobody addresses it. This even in a hospital, and that's where for me it was like, oh, she knows that if she was a dude, she knows that her thing swings. Like,
yeah,
the rules don't.
She had the same reaction when Ricky asked her if she's supposed to be on the field. She was just like, just appalled that she would be asked that question. Of course she's allowed on the field. She's allowed wherever the hell she wants. And then she gets on the field and Coach Hudson says, what the hell are you doing on the field? She's like, what the hell do you mean? What the hell am I doing on the field? Make the quarterback change.
Yep. And she's the one who can make those demands as kind of the lead booster. And we know she's the leading person in the clubhouse, a lot of legacy with the university, a lot of legacy with the team. The Jumbotron's named after her. Her dad, she inherited all of her money from her dad, and she's the lead booster. And again, she doesn't give a damn. She's the athletic director booster, or not the athletic director, but the lead booster who can make those calls.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So John, 2 favorite characters, 1 least favorite character. Who are they?
I actually really like Tricia because I think she is there and she has some really, really witty comments. And she's also kind of Chad's champion, right? Like, she gives Russ a few
She's merit-based.
She is. And she gives Russ like being Chad, like a lot of nuggets throughout the season, maybe not a lot, but they're spread out, so it feels like a lot of different nuggets that he takes to heart and really kickstarts his personal growth.
Absolutely.
I really like Coach Ricky because we're seeing that she has ideas and she can relate to Russ without knowing that she can relate to Russ on that personal level of she was a superstar until she hurt her knee. She ran track at South Georgia and everybody loved her until she hurt her knee. And then now she's trying to just get her plays called. And she called the winning play. Well, she tried to call the winning play and it almost got Chad in trouble in that first game against Ole Miss because she spotted things that nobody else spotted, but it didn't catch anybody's eyes.
I want to pick a nit on this. This is one of the nits because I agree with all of that. But you know what was weird to me is that it's this dynamic of Ricky trying to go through Coach Dobbs, the quarterback coach, to get to Coach Bird to call the plays. Because ultimately Coach Bird calls the plays, but Coach Bird is close with Coach Hudson. And he seems like he would actually have an honest conversation with Ricky about her plays and things like that. I understand that there's a chain of command. But it is weird to me that she can't just sit down and have a conversation with Coach Bird either. Like you would think Coach Bird is the offensive coordinator who oversees the entire offensive staff could have like that skip level conversation with her. Especially like, do any of us think that Coach Bird doesn't realize what a doofus Coach Dobbs is?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to argue that, especially because the reason they had a quarterback tryout in the very first place, they lost both of their starting and backup quarterback to the portal, which tells you there wasn't confidence.
You don't leave jobs. You leave managers.
Exactly. And if that's the quarterback coach, they didn't have confidence in the quarterback coach. The offensive coordinator has to be looking at that and thinking the exact same thing. And then, you know, the quarterback's coach is always asking for a can to dip in. Like those are the tasks he's giving Ricky to go.
And he tells Jerry there is no God. As he says, I didn't think I could get hit this much and not die against Ole Miss.
Yeah, there are some good lines in there, but it is a good point. Now, the counterpoint is Coach Ricky does not want a single shred of favoritism. She tells Coach Hudson multiple times, don't call me sweetheart in front of the guys. You need to call me Coach Ricky. Those types of things that shows she doesn't want any viewpoint of a nepotism hire.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying where
I think she's cutting her nose to spite her face, honestly.
100%.
Like, I think if she wasn't the coach's daughter, like, that's still something that you should do to try and ingratiate yourself and get your voice heard. And she didn't do that. So it's interesting. I actually would say that if it wasn't Coach Dobbs, Ricky would be my least favorite character, which is all relative because I actually like all of the characters except for Coach Dobbs. But I just think, like, on the scale, Ricky would be the lowest. For me, it is Chad first, and look, you know, he is designed to be the character that you're most
Chad
attached to.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so I was gonna say, if we set him aside, then the two that I choose are Danny and Tricia. Those are the two that I got the most comic relief from. That I thought each of them brought a dynamic to the show that nobody else was bringing. Like it would be a completely different show, not only if that character didn't exist. If Danny was, you know, some person on campus and not the mascot, or if somebody else was playing that. I think the actor who plays Danny, and I didn't write his name down, excellent. Like, what an excellent.
Oh, he killed it. Yeah. And with Chad, the amount of character development that comes out of Chad Powers and Russ Holiday throughout the show, the nuggets that they breadcrumb in to show his fall from grace, where he's excited to play for the NFL, or not the NFL, the XFL, the Las Vegas Vipers. And
that's right.
Like, he's excited, and that's his march back. And so he goes to celebrate, and he goes to celebrate with Hawk Tua girl, who's pissed off that he doesn't know her name, who then, when everything falls apart, tells him, please don't tell people we hung out. And like, if she doesn't want to be seen with you, that's really bad. And then we find out that he's a conspiracy theorist. He threw stuff about Princess Diana on Twitter. He mentions conspiracies.
That scene, by the way, so well done. The way that he like flipped into conspiracy theorist mode. Like,
watch a video!
Yeah, which was so good.
And like,
I forgot about his dad. I didn't include his dad as one of the characters. I don't even remember his dad's name, and I guess that goes, you know, further to that point. But I liked his dad as a character. I think their dynamic is good.
Well, especially in the last episode of the season where he starts to redeem himself in his dad's eyes because his dad just wants to be proud of him. His dad just wants his son to go work for something. And he's been such a loser for 8 years, hanging with crypto bros, chasing get rich quick schemes, sleeping on the couch, and being a drunk, that it's been hard to do that. And he has this moment where it's like, he calls his dad and he's like, aren't you so worried that I disappeared? He's like, at some point you run out of caring, or something along those lines.
His dad said, I thought you died. And he's, why didn't you call me or call the police? And he said, well, you stole a bunch of stuff from me. And at some point, to your point, you just, you stop caring. Although, can I ask you, John, like, he must have done well with the crypto bros, right? He must have done well with something, because 8 years ago, there was no NIL. So if he was getting paid, he was getting paid under the table. And if he was the best quarterback in the country, he was probably getting paid under the table. But he's got a cyber truck. That's a $100,000 truck. So, and it, like, there could have been a Repo Man plot line on this.
Yeah,
there's not.
He got some money, right? Like, he's got a blood diamond in his ear, which again, episode 3,
but you think over 8 years that somebody with his level of responsibility would no longer have some money. Right?
I think he's broke. He lives at his dad's house on his dad's couch. He does errands for his dad in prosthetics, which his dad is a leading prosthetic guy on all these Michael Bay movies, which I don't know how well those folks do, but being the guy for special effects and visual effects and practical effects. Practical effects is the word I was looking for. I got there. I had to fish for it, but I got there. That can't be just a budget job. So my guess is the Cybertruck is really all he has left. He was probably involved with pump and dumps. He was probably the celebrity guy that was paid to be there. We know about celebrity endorsements for sketchy organizations, especially in today's day and age. As a Blazers fan, I'll just leave it at that. And so there was probably, like, that's all he's got is my gut feeling. And that's why this is so important. Now, my biggest question is, like, is his long-term goal to go to the NFL as Chad Powers and play as Chad Powers?
We're going to talk about that as we talk about season 2 prognostication. So let's not get into that too much right now. But that is the $1 million question: is, like, what does he think the end game is here? And I think it's going to be really interesting.
He alludes to it early on, right? His short-term goal is, I'm going to go win the tryout, and then I'm going to be the starter, and then I'm going to unveil
win the
myself.
National championship.
No, he didn't.
Did he say that originally?
The original goal was just
that's right.
Win the open tryout, unveil, and now I'm going to go play in the XFL, because even though the cancer kid died and I have all this bad press, I can still ball out. And that's when he didn't get the starter. He's going to be the backup to Jerry, and he called his dad to say he's coming home, and his dad's like, I don't care. And Chad was like, screw it, I'll be the clipboard guy. Which was a really cool turning point moment of, that was him hitting rock bottom, as he even went through all this stuff, realized he could still ball. But even then, Jerry, of all people, is the starter, not the backup. He's got a blood diamond, not a lab-grown zirconium or whatever it is, which is like
cubic zirconium. Yeah.
Cubic zirconium. And, like, that's that last line to me where after that in Knoxville, he really started to flip the script and drop the conspiracy theories. Drop, like, it being a blood diamond was important to Russ Holiday as a piece of shit human being. Now it's not.
Well, and I think at the same time, that was that moment where he realized that if he wants to let go of the bad of Russ Holiday, he also has to let go of the good history of Russ Holiday, because his whole problem, to your point, was, what do you mean I'm the backup? In my mind, I know that I'm the best quarterback in the country. I've still got it, but nobody else knows that. And he has that, realization, that reinforcement over and over, that it's like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, I have to build from the ground up again and do it in a way that doesn't blow my cover.
Well, yeah, and in the tryout, he takes his helmet off and his wig comes off. And he's like, oh, I got to keep my helmet on because I feel strong.
Makes me feel strong, like a man, coach.
That line was great. I loved it.
One of the great lines. It didn't actually make my top 10. We'll get to that in a second. But, John, I want to ask you about character-to-character story arcs, because there are a number of them, and I want to know what was your most favorite and what was your least favorite. So, Chad obviously dominates. You've got the Chad-Ricky dynamic. You've got the Chad-Danny dynamic. You have the Chad-Jerry dynamic. Then you have the Chad-Tricia dynamic. So he has completely different relationships and plot lines with all of them. Then outside of Chad, you've got Coach Hudson and Tricia, which for my money, it's one of the three best plot lines there, because it feels like it so closely mirrors what a big time college football coach in a embattled state would be going through. But then you've got Coach Hudson and Ricky, and then of course the last one I wrote down is Wendy, Coach Hudson, and Ricky, and what's going on there. And maybe, I don't think that's going to be one of our favorites or our least favorite, so maybe we could dispose of that one. You have Coach Hudson, who's married to Wendy, and Wendy is tired of being a coach's wife. You actually, like, you get the sense at first that she's just uppity, but then, like, you learn through the show she just wants her husband back. She wants time with her husband, and he lives the life of a major college football coach. And then, I think it is obvious over the course of several episodes that Wendy is not Ricky's mom, and that Ricky is in this awkward third wheel position where she wants to love and support her dad and be grateful to her dad, who is her boss, while she also wants to see her dad and Wendy have a good life together. Like, she's clearly not apathetic to Wendy or even adversarial.
She wants her dad to be happy.
Yeah.
And one thing I will say is that moment at the college game day lunch on the dock, his crash out, that's just the term that comes to mind. His crash out over what it is to be an NIL coach nowadays. It resonated in such a strong way where he said, like, this is a full year round thing. And I have to keep my players happy, because if they don't get enough starting time, they leave. So I need to make sure that they feel like they're getting growth, they're getting visibility. I have to go recruit from other schools through the transfer portal. I need to go compete, with recruits that are 17, 18, budgets and all of these. And I think you and I had this conversation, the Miami-Stanford game, where I was like, is that Andrew Luck on the sideline? And you're like, yeah, he's their GM. And it was a conversation about how college coaches are not enough anymore. You have to have a GM at a college program now. And that's much of a job as an AD is.
Your GM is not the CEO either. The GM works for the coach in these programs. They're not independent of the coach. That's the reporting structure. So the GM is really like a COO. And the coach is like the CEO. And as I wrote several weeks ago in Barely Qualified Picks, it used to be that college and professional head coaches had different but similarly difficult, taxing jobs. That is not the case anymore, because the college coach still has to recruit, but now the college coach has to manage the portal and this incredible turnover and players knowing that not only can they leave, you used to have to sit out a year if you transfer, right? Or be a graduate student. Not only can you leave, but you're being enticed to leave. Even if you haven't played, there are schools out there that are going to say, not only will you play, but we'll write you a check. And I think the college head coaching job, especially at, an SEC school or a Big Ten school, it is far more difficult than an NFL head coaching job today. And they do get paid really well, but I don't think it's proportionate.
No, not at all. And it just gives all this credibility and credence to their relationship was probably great when he won Coach of the Year, because there was an off season. They could go on vacations. They live in a beautiful lake house in Georgia. But that time has come and gone, and now Wendy's acting out. She stays at her sister's for a really long time. And you mentioned the relationship with Coach Hudson and Tricia. Tricia knows something's wrong. She knows what it's like to be the lead booster around the head coach. She obviously knows Wendy because they've been through all these kind of events together, and Wendy's not there anymore.
2016 Coach of the Year. I mean, we're talking about 10 years at the school.
A decade. At least, probably longer.
Yeah. And he probably didn't win in his first year.
And it's these types of things where Tricia's kind of dancing around the issue, and she's trying to give advice, but she's also kind of poking at it like, look, there are a lot of reasons that you could be gone here. So you better win. And when I tell you to play Chad instead of Jerry, you better do it.
Yeah, she said, if I find myself in a Liberty Bowl quarter zip at the end of the year, fuck the Liberty Bowl, as she said. Indeed. And you know what? That feels very authentic to the conversation that a major booster and an SEC coach would have these days. Okay, so favorite character-to-character story arc?
Chad and Danny, just because Danny is the one who tells Russ everything to his face like it's straight. People don't recognize you because they either are embarrassed to see you on the street, or the Rose Bowl was 8 years ago and they've forgotten you. And like that gut punch to Russ was huge and kind of snapped him out of it. And also, like, he was the one in that last scene in the trailer with Russ and his dad that saw what was happening and helped Russ get to that point to be vulnerable with his dad. He pulled open the highlights and, like, really facilitated that and then stepped back. And it was a beautiful moment. It was just enough from Danny to see what was needed. And, like, yeah, that's where, like, you ask, is Danny waiting for this to blow up? I think it started off where Danny said, you know, obviously, Russ asking the question that all of us as the viewers want to know, well, what does Danny get out of this? Why is he helping?
Yeah.
And Danny's like, because you're going to owe me something, and this is going to be worth something someday. And that's important. But then I think it turns into Danny wants to, you know,
Real friendship.
That, and Danny's invested in the team, right? Like, he's the mascot. He goes to every single game. He wants to see the team win.
Yeah.
And Chad Powers is how that team wins.
No doubt. No doubt.
What about you? What was your favorite relationship?
I'm going to go. So you hit on my two favorite in Chad Danny and then in Coach Hudson Tricia. So I'm going to go to my third favorite, which is Chad Jerry. And I think that this one is so interesting because, again, you know, when you look at the character of Chad Powers, he is an asshole who is self-righteous and believes he is owed something, right? Even in his new character of Chad Powers, he feels entitled. And one of the big dynamics of his evolution is how he comes across as a teammate, and he doesn't want to shit on Jerry, but he wants to be a good teammate and a friend. And that's something that is very antithetical to his innate personality, but it's also something that he comes around on. And yet, even as he does all the right things, Jerry turns into his enemy, right? You would think that Jerry, the God-fearing Tim Tebow type, receiving nothing but love from the guy who was happy to not just hold your clipboard, but hold your urine jug. Ooh, we'll talk about that in a second. We'll talk about it. It's on my top 10. Gross. But, like, you would think that Jerry would understand. And then, you know, Jerry, in that game that he got pulled out, he said, I'm getting killed. I'm getting absolutely killed. And they weren't moving the ball. And then Chad comes in and wins. And so, like, if Jerry is who Jerry purported to be, somebody who's just happy to be there, following the path that God laid for him, et cetera, all the things that he said, why does he turn into a villain?
F-bomb dropping.
And I love that dynamic. I love that whole, coming to that end. And like, I don't want to give anything away, but let's give it away because this is a spoilers heavy podcast. And yeah, I mean, Jerry going on that F-word laden tirade at the end, and it opened one of the biggest questions of season 2 is like, what the hell is going to happen with Jerry next? But I just love that dynamic, and I loved how that relationship evolved and went somewhere that, frankly, I didn't really expect, right? I thought it could go there, but I thought it would be because Chad broke and did something intentionally hurtful to Jerry that changed Jerry's view of Chad, and that didn't happen. Jerry just got beat out.
No, I think there was a straw that broke the camel's back, right? Jerry says, I've been here cleaning up the garbage for 5 years. So this tells you it's his last shot to go be a starter.
But he knows he sucks.
He knows he sucks, but in his mind, he put in the work. He was there. He always did the cardio.
No, I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry. That's bullshit. Because this is a 53, in college, 110 guys on a team, whatever it is, right? Like, they're 5-0, and Jerry wants to be, you know, wants to put himself first. He wants to be egotistical, and he wants to make it all about him. That doesn't make sense for Jerry's character. You would think that if anybody would see that somebody was better than him and want to stand aside so that all of his teammates could benefit, it would be Jerry.
Yeah, but the rules don't apply to Chad, and that at the end is what Jerry was so pissed about. Chad disappeared and ghosted his teammates for 3 days after the interaction between Ricky, Danny, and Chad. And so then he didn't even ride the bus, and he shows up minutes before kickoff, and that's where Jerry loses it. And also, I think it's the lack of acceptance from his teammates. Jerry's trying to give this rah-rah speech about God, and they're going to get the job done. Chad walks in and goes, hey guys, and everybody explodes into laughter and celebration because thank God we're not stuck with terrible Jerry. And now we have a shot. And I think that's that breaking point for Jerry of it's all coming down on him. He's done everything God's laid out in front of him. He's been the right guy. And like, he has this really cool interaction when they're on the bus back from Knoxville where he's like, man, God's crazy. The world is crazy. A week ago, I was starting and he was backing me up. And now I'm backing him up and he's starting. And like, Jerry was happy about it because it was God's plan, to your point. But I
don't think he ever was. This is what I'm saying. I don't think he ever was. I think that was part of the character, was that there was this shell around Jerry, this God shell around Jerry. But inside, Jerry's been steaming the whole time.
And I think that's why
when Chad came back, he blew.
I would like to watch it again and look for those little breadcrumbs to see if that's, you catch a lot of things on a second watch, if that is what leads there. But that blow up was epic. And then Ricky coming in and kind of saving the day as Chad, again, on the fly, is trying to make up this reason for why he wasn't there. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. But also, when he's like, the Cybertruck, I had an airtight alibi, we're good. I think she bought it. And it's just like, the reason he gives...
Whiskers got it in the settlement. And and then, here's the thing that kills me. If Whiskers got it in a settlement, just say he had a car accident a couple of years ago. Why do you go into the suit caught fire? Like, if anybody would know that the mascot suit caught fire, it created third-degree burns that led to a lawsuit and a settlement, I think the coaching staff would know. Not a little bit of a plot hole there, but I mean, again, like that's Chad, right? And that was deliberate because they wanted to leave no doubt that Ricky knows who Chad is. So, all right. I think those are the big storylines from a character to character perspective. I'm ready to get into favorite scenes and lines if you are.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So I have these in chronological order, not necessarily in order of which, delighted me the most, but it starts with episode 1. He finds out that he's lost the XFL opportunity, and in a last desperate hope to keep it all together, he says, I'll play for free. And his agent says, you are already going to play for free. Like, gut punch 1 is Chad loses the XFL opportunity and seemingly his athletic career with it. Gut punch 2 is he didn't even realize how far away he was to being back, right? Because he was going to have.
I didn't put 2 and 2 together there that, like, he didn't realize that was the case. And the agent was, like, telling him that for the first time. He thought he was going to be collecting a check and he would be there for a short period of time. And it's like, no, bro, like, you're like one step above a tryout. That was a gut punch. And again, that then is followed by the salt in the wound from Hawk to a Girl of please don't tell people we hung out. And the thing that we're leaving out is after he loses the Rose Bowl, which multiple times throughout the year he says God fisted him and all this stuff, and
wind blew the ball out of my hand. The crowd was being too loud.
In the 5th episode, he says you're 1 yard from the goal line and the wind knocks the ball out of your hand. And it's like, dude,
just can't take accountability for it.
And then he punches a cancer dad's patient who falls into the cancer patient.
A cancer dad's kid. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Cancer kid, make a wish.
Who Russ was his favorite player. And then that comes back later, right? Where Coach Dobbs' son or a former player
John, can I also say, like, bad dad, right? I'm sorry. But they went through all of the transgressions that Russ Holiday had that year. It's like they had a Las Vegas freeway incident that they allude to, amidst a bunch of other things. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm going to try and steer my kid to somebody who maybe isn't in the news for bad shit all the time. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think, like, the Ducks never had anybody like that. Cliff Harris just smoked a ton of weed and drove too fast.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
It's just, again, it had to be the Ducks.
All right, so do you have one that you want to go with next, or do you want my second one?
Give me your second one, because the first episode had a lot of good moments. I really like the moments later on in the season.
I do too, yeah. I only had one from the first episode and one from the second, and then it picks up. The one from the second is the legend of Chad, when they ask him about playing in front of a crowd, and he saw how it didn't happen often due to the Wolves, carrying off the babes. And, that obviously goes back to the scene that you alluded to earlier with Danny and Chad, where Danny's like, Chad, you're creating canon. Everything you say is now part of your history. You can't just do that. But Chad was feeling really good about himself and that incredible story about why nobody attended games, because those darn wolves carrying off the babes.
Well, but then that also got him in trouble because that's one of the reasons he wasn't the starter. And I think that was the knock-on effect that he started to realize he can't just make up stuff because it will come back to haunt him. When he sat down with Coach Hudson, he said, "You've never played in front of a crowd before. So you need to at least go see what that's like." One of my favorite little just nuggets is in the game against Ole Miss, end of the second episode, when he runs in that first touchdown, he's like cradling it and he won't give it to the ref because he's so scared of dropping it that like the ref has to take it from him. I just loved that. That made me so happy. And then obviously,
I thought that was great.
Yeah, when Jerry is taken out by Whiskers, and that's a nice assist from the mascot to hurt Jerry. And I think that's another thing that sucks for Jerry, to just kind of close the loop on it. It's not like he lost the job. Technically, he was hurt and then came back healthy and lost the starting job to injury. Ask Alex Smith. It sucks when that happens. But hey, when there's a better quarterback at play, that's the reality.
He was also promoted by default because the first stringer and the second stringer both left. Like, I mean, come on. Yeah. Sometimes you just have to be happy to be there. And it seemed like Jerry was at first, and then he wasn't. So, all right, my third one, maybe my favorite line from the whole season, probably a woman pilot. I don't have a woman pilot. What's wrong with women pilots? I mean, Tricia at her best.
Showing the snarkiness and the ability to maneuver at that highest level of back and forth with people who look down on her. It was so good. Just the turnabout there. And then she would do that multiple times. She'd be able to read between the lines. Like, it was such a good establishment of her character and how dangerous she can be.
I thought they got like the middle-aged, white, like slightly overweight, but pompous SEC booster so spot on, right? Like the guy she's talking to and his plane, he's got to leave early because, you know, he says that they're not going to win. She says, you know, because he's further down the pecking order on the private airfield. And she loves that, to your point. Like, she not only knows her position, but she reminds everyone of it. All right, I got another one from episode 3, and we're going back to that game against Ole Miss where they make the change. And look, I know that the word retard is sensitive for a lot of people, and I don't take that lightly. The word is used in the show, and so we're gonna use the word just like it's used in the show. And look, I mean, love it or hate it, it was one of the funniest lines in the entire season when, you know, first you have Chad saying to Ricky, maybe we need a different kind of retard. And then Ricky gritting her teeth and just, you could tell she's like, this is not a word that comes out of her mouth normally, but she says it. She's no offense to Jerry. He says, I am offended. I'm very offended by that.
I love that part.
But that was one of the best exchanges. And then, yeah, like Chad gets his moment and Ricky has a voice. Even knowing that when she's tried to have a voice up until that point, she's been shut down. But Ricky has a spine, and because that Ricky has a voice, and because of that Chad gets into the game and the whole season changes for the...
Well, and I also love that because she yells that at Coach Hudson, who doesn't have any kind of context. And like, look, we've all been there when you have a conversation with somebody and you forget other people don't have the context and you go and just try and jump into it. And it's like, let me back up.
Yeah. No doubt. Well, and earlier in that episode, another one of my favorite lines, well, not lines, but scenes is, you know, when Chad is helping Jerry relieve himself on the sideline, which I don't think we've ever seen in a college football game. Maybe we have. I don't know. I always thought that when players have to go, they just go. Maybe that's wrong. But, you know, I thought, you know, they get a little bit of time. There's like a porta potty or something somewhere nearby, and they don't need to do that right there on the sideline. Regardless, it couldn't have been more humbling for Chad to be holding something even less appealing than a clipboard. And that was Jerry's piss, right? And just the way he responded to that, and then he kept holding on to it. And Coach Ricky is like, why are you still holding on to it? And then obviously throws it away. But that one got me. I cracked up like belly laugh with that exchange.
Yeah, it was solid. Just start to finish where he was excited because he thought he was going to get to go in the game. It was not what he was expecting.
No, it wasn't. All right, what else do you have from episode 3? Because that was maybe the richest episode we got.
Yeah, I think it's Ricky, and I alluded to this earlier. It's when Ricky calls out that on 3rd and long, the other team was playing 2 high safeties, I believe, was the call, and she had Aggies. Aggies was the play. She mentioned it to her coach. She mentioned it up the chain, but quarterback's coach was not going to run it because he, quote, couldn't even get his plays in. And when Chad is on that last play of the game, he has the superstar wide receiver. He sees exactly what was called. Ricky was kicked off the sideline. She's watching from in the locker room. And he's got, the helmet on, microphone and all that, because this is a really important little nugget that teases what's important later on. He calls the play, and that's when the coach is like, that's Ricky's play. And Coach Hudson goes, if you ever do this again, I'll kill you. But go win this game. Which tells you that Coach Hudson is a lot of things. The things he cares most about is winning. He realizes how important winning is. And that is a theme that comes up multiple times.
It does.
And so I just thought that was important to set the tone. They do so many things in this show that set the tone and establish kind of the framework and the guardrails for the rest of the show. And then, of course, runs the play to perfection, touchdown, time expires, and that's when we see Eli Manning say, who the hell was that guy?
Yeah.
Great cameo.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Anything else from episode 3, or can we move to episode 4, to one of my favorite scenes of the season?
Well, let's move to episode 4.
All right. So Chad signing the football for another ill child, and immediately starts signing it as Russ, and then realizes his mistake in the moment and starts coloring in the football with the silver Sharpie. And the line in Chad's voice that got me was, I think we may need another Sharpie. And it just...
That scene went on so long, too. Like, it made you as the viewer uncomfortable because you just watched him continue. It felt like an office scene,
Yes. Yeah, where it's just like, we're just gonna, it's cringier. Oh, we're getting cringier. Oh. But yeah, he nailed that. And even when he says, so like, are you sick? And he's like, yes, Chad, he is sick. And like, Chad obviously wouldn't ask that as Russ Holiday. That was one of those moments where you realize that Chad is really bought into the character.
Well, and I think, yes, from Chad's perspective, from Russ's perspective, he's like, oh God, it's happening again. Because the kid's dad was like, he really likes you. They're 2-0 at that point. I don't think they had gone to Tennessee yet. Or maybe this was after they had gotten back from Tennessee, but like, Chad Powers was now a known entity. ESPN was following them, and he's like, oh God, another kid with cancer. I have to do better this time.
Yep. I love that storyline. They could have easily skipped that little part, but you got so much out of that one exchange. Anything else from episode 4? Because my top 10 takes us to episode 5 next.
Let's roll.
Okay. 2 words. Benjamin Franklin. I loved this game day interview, and like, we've watched so many iterations of College Game Day and so many of these interviews, and Chad, who inspired you to play football? And he's thinking, could have just said his mom, could have said, we had, old newspapers of Roger Staubach or whatever. No, he says, Benjamin Franklin. Hey, he's right. Father of electricity, father of light. Benjamin Franklin can't play football in the dark, of course. And so, yeah, thank you, Ben Franklin, for light and thus for enabling football night games.
100%. I mean, look, as a West Coaster, we get a lot of football games that kick off at 7:30 p.m. now. Some are better than others, but we couldn't have those without electricity. I also just want to say that, like, carrying on Tricia's just need for this game day interview to go well, and how important this was to NIL, the spotlight that it could put on the franchise. Like, it's almost like Coach Hudson hadn't quite realized how much of the pageantry was mandatory yet, and then that led to the blow up later on in the episode. So you mentioned this as being one of your scenes. I like it because, again, it's all of that groundwork for, maybe some of these more casual college football fans that don't quite fully understand what this sport has turned into, where, Yeah, historically, look, college football, most important sports for any college program. Basketball, kind of a 1B for a lot of programs, but B because they bring in the money. Now it's like that to the nth degree. And getting this right fills the NIL coffers, is what she said. Like, that's how important this is to get right. So Chad had to get this right, which led to everything else in the episode. And just Chad's
and that brings
interviews.
me to my next moment in the episode, which, to exactly that point, it's life or death, essentially. And if it's not life or death, it's something close to it in Georgia, for South Georgia fans and for Tricia. And Tricia's talking to Coach Hudson before the Georgia game and talks about it being, the biggest moment of Coach Hudson's life. And then she says, hell, it's the biggest moment of my life. And I was there when the Challenger exploded. I was 8. It fucked me up. And again, it was such a well-crafted and beautifully delivered line. I laughed hard, but it was just like, it drove home that point that this is as big as anything. I mean, the Challenger exploding and people dying and the impacts on our space program and being there for it. And yet the Georgia game is still potentially the biggest game ever. And I think that's real. When I was in college, John, I went on the study abroad. You remember when I went to Italy and went to all these different countries in Europe? We were there for like 6 months. I remember leaving after the 4th of July, and then I came home just before Christmas. And while I was there, I met another person on the trip, on the study abroad program, who was from the University of Kansas, and her dad was an Oklahoma alum. He invented the door stopper thing that goes on the upper hinge behind a door to keep it from whacking the wall. And so he was a lawyer, I think a good lawyer, but he was a very successful inventor. He did something else too, had tons and tons and tons of money. And the man had not missed an Oklahoma home game since 1981. 1981, had not missed an Oklahoma home game. And I remember we were in Greece. We were in Athens. And we went out to, the islands for a couple of days, and then we came back, and we were supposed to be there for 2 more days. And Papa Jack, which is what we called him, Papa Jack, and he paid for everything. I will say, like, he was one of the funnest dudes. We got drunk on absinthe together. I bought a Pope costume, and we walked around Athens, and I was singing the Halo song in my head, and this was all recorded, so we saw it the next day. Thank God that recording doesn't exist anymore, but I walked around going, oh, oh, and I was buying food from all the food carts and handing it to the stray dogs, which did not please anybody in Athens. So Papa Jack and I had a really, really great time. The next morning we wake up, and his commercial flight gets canceled. And he wasn't going to be able to make it back for the game. So he spent $50,000 to charter a jet to fly him back from Greece to Oklahoma to be in Norman for that game. Like, that's how much it mattered to him.
And like we talked about, that's tier 1, not even tier S, where we're talking. So, like...
That's right. Although this was back in 2006... Oklahoma was S tier at that time.
Yeah, they were still competing for BCS bowls. You remember the BCS bowls when those were important?
Yeah. Do you remember Adrian Peterson? Can I throw an Oklahoma name at you? You remember Adrian Peterson? He was pretty good.
Yeah, he couldn't get past Boise State, but yeah, he was all right.
That's fair. Couldn't get past the Ducks either because we got an onside kick that wasn't ours, and that whole game ended very weirdly. But we did beat Adrian Peterson and the Oklahoma Sooners in Eugene, and I was there for that game. All right, so my 10th scene, Ricky confronts Chad and Danny on the field, and then Russ on the bus in the season finale. Both confrontations, so well done. But I give the gold star to Glenn Powell for the monologue that he delivers at the end of the bus scene, where he then lays out for Ricky the realities of her potentially outing him to the world. And it sets in, and it's not just the emotion and the vulnerability that he displays as he's telling her why he did this. And she is, and if you've ever been in a fight, we're both men that have, been married for a long time. And you know how it is sometimes when you fight and there's a lot of anger there. You're not hearing each other. And she was just so angry at him and saying, such hurtful, harmful things, knowing she's trying to hurt him. And he's just taking it and trying to explain. And then at the very end, it's like, okay, well, I tried the good cop thing. I tried to be reasonable, but here's why you're really not going to do this. And then for her to just go, huh? And you knew when he walked into the locker room that she was coming in after him to back him up. There was zero doubt in my mind that she was going to back him up because she was not going to do that to her dad.
Yeah.
Because she loves her dad, going back to what you said earlier. She loves her fucking dad. And why shouldn't she? Look at the life he's given her.
There are a couple things where the build up to that reveal, where Coach Ricky gets suspicious back in episode 3 when she sees him as Russ Holiday in the hotel. They've crossed paths where he was Russ Holiday and she's the only person who recognized him. Waiting for the elevator, she goes, oh shit, you're Russ Holiday. And they have a little back and forth. And then she starts to get suspicious when she Googles him, remembers that he was this incredible dual threat quarterback at Oregon. And then on the bus ride home, what did they say? Like 430 through the air, 70 yards on the ground. Like, we got a real dual threat quarterback. It's Coach Dobbs talking to Coach Bird. And that like puts this little thing in her head.
Coach Bird says, we got a fucking quarterback. And they said, like, this is Coach Bird, the most pessimistic guy ever. And he was like, yeah, we got a
Yeah, and it's all these things where she's putting these pieces together, and then obviously the nail in the coffin was when they ride in the Cybertruck together, and she puts 2 and 2 together there. But on the field,
but John, it all revolves back around this theme, right? And it is a central theme to football as a sport. There is no I in team. It's we, not me. And Coach Ricky has to decide, does she put the team first? Chad has to decide, does he put the team first? Because Chad could bail at that point and disappear. Nobody would ever see him again.
Chad did bail, right? He would bail.
But I mean, Chad could bail. Chad could take off the makeup, go back to being Russ Holiday, and never be Chad Powers again. And he would be on a milk carton. People would be like, literally, what happened to Chad Powers? Now, would somebody actually file a complaint and then they would start investigating and then they would figure out who he was? Maybe. It is 2025. But like, he had the opportunity to choose me, not we, and bail on the embarrassment that he said he knew was coming. Like,
well, and he was going to do that, right? That's why he went to his dad to give the makeup back. And his dad was the one who's like, you put in all this work, all this stuff. And it culminates in that moment where for a second, they make you think Ricky's going to understand, where she's like, can I touch your face and all that?
And then she slaps him. That was so.
And then the way that when Russ is giving that monologue, you can tell he doesn't want to do it. You can tell it's not malicious intent. You can tell he's disgusted with himself. But he doesn't want to do that to Coach Hudson either. And 100%. He doesn't want to leave his team hanging either. For him, for the first time in his life, he's doing this for the team and for somebody else. It's not about him anymore.
Well, I will push back on that a little bit. I don't know that it was ever about him. I think he always put the team first, and winning first for the right to coach the team. Like, that's not a selfish thing necessarily. Like, I've been there where you really want to win because you want the team to be successful, because you love the position you're in and the people that you're around and all of that. And you know, if you don't win, all of that falls apart. That's not selfish, I don't think. But I do hear what you're saying. And again, I think it all comes back to this idea of, are you focused on me or are you focused on we, right? Jerry, are you focused on me, Jerry, or are you focused on we? Nishan, are you focused on me or are you focused on we as the star receiver, right? The whole season, Coach Hudson with his wife, are you focused on me or are you focused on your we, right? And it comes back to this central truth that in big time college football, if anybody doesn't choose we over me, it all comes crumbling.
Chain's only as strong as its weakest link, and that's so true. And what did you say, a 72-man roster for college football?
72. I mean, college football, you could have as many guys as you want. I think you get 100 scholarships, but there are a lot of college football rosters that have like 110 guys on it. Tons, right? NFL's 53 men, much smaller. But yeah, college is a lot. All right, John, I have one more that I had skipped over, and actually, and I realized I put it last because it hit me so hard. And it's a Tricia line. Shocker. Everyone deserves to be happy, however they get there. Is there any more universal truth than that in this show, right? Like that is Tricia, who is so hard-nosed and so demanding and so exacting, being the one to reveal that truth. Because I mean, I certainly believe that everyone deserves to be. I mean, maybe not however you get there. Like, it can't be like Dexter, right? I was Dexter for Halloween. However, like there's a gray area with Dexter. But I think for the most part, when people are doing things that are law abiding and don't infringe on the safety and security of their fellow humans, yeah, like do you.
Yeah, that one resonated in a big way, especially because once again, it spoke to the different characters and what their motivations are and just what they're out to get. And I think for Chad, that really, again, just reconfigured his brain. Although I think that was actually to coach Hudson, if I'm recalling correctly, where that came up.
Yeah.
And that's where she was basically like, look, figure your shit out with Wendy. You don't have time to be sad about this.
Yeah. All right, John, that wraps up my favorite plot lines, scenes, lines. Now I want to get into our season 1 ranking of what I would call, in parentheses, mostly great sports shows. So we've got 6 shows here, including Chad Powers. I'm going to read them in no particular order. The League, Stick, Chad Powers, Ted Lasso, Eastbound and Down, and Friday Night Lights. What is your least favorite? Let's go from 6 to 1. You give me your least favorite, then I'll give you mine.
Okay, are we talking about just season 1 for these shows?
We're just talking about season 1. Absolutely. Because like when you think about The League, right? The League in season 1, that was probably its worst season. Because the way their development timelines worked, there was too much of a gap between when they started shooting and when they published an episode. And so it wasn't relevant fantasy football conversation. Then in season 2, they fixed that. They significantly shortened the development timelines. And every week it felt like they were talking about last week. And that heightened my enjoyment of the show significantly. So when I just look at season 1 for The League, I'm considering that original dynamic and not what it grew into.
Yeah, so I would put The League as my least favorite out of what you listed here. I love The League. It had a rough first season. The characters took time to get developing. Taco didn't really turn into Taco as we knew him well until kind of season 2 or 3. Like, it was very much kind of similar to The Office, kind of similar to Parks and Rec, where season 1 is not what the rest of the show was, and that's okay. That happens.
Yeah. Okay, for me, 6 is Stick. I watched Stick this summer. You and I were both excited for Stick. I think I'm a golf fan. I like playing golf in real life. Really like Owen Wilson. I was excited, but I didn't enjoy it very much at all. It didn't seem to catch great viewership, maybe decent viewership. It rated decently well, but it flopped for me. There were too many plot holes. I really disliked the kid who played the golfer character. I didn't like the Zero character who was seemingly much older than him and was a terrible influence, and how Owen Wilson handled all that and all the money that he put into it, and even his ex-wife. And it just, too many plot holes for me. Didn't enjoy it. Would not go back for season 2.
I'll probably watch season 2 when it comes out, because that was just my wife and I watch an episode of a show a night. That was our show for a little bit. It was okay. Between okay and good is the best way I'll put it. I had a lot of plot holes and things where I felt like they rushed too quickly, and they didn't develop it well enough is the best way I'll put it.
Yeah. Well, I've got The League in my 5th spot. It was groundbreaking. We talked about that. It gave huge legitimacy to fantasy football. But season 1 just wasn't as good as the other seasons, and so it sits in 5th for me. What's your 5th place show?
I have a lot of friends that in that time frame wanted to join a fantasy football league because they discovered The League and how fun it was. And some of those are still in our friends group now that, they don't really branch out between or from their specific football team that they love, but they're in it now.
Yeah, for sure. All right, what's your 5th show?
My 5th, probably Stick, for the reasons that we just talked about.
Okay, so then let's move on to number 4. My number 4 is Chad Powers. I thought great sports dramedy, great character development, really enjoyed the performances. I really hope season 2 exceeds season 1. I was left on the edge wanting more, but I couldn't put it above the 3 shows I have in the 1, 2, and 3 spots. Just couldn't.
So you're going to hate me for this. My fourth show is Eastbound and Down. I loved it.
How dare you? How dare you? We should stop this podcast right now. I'm going to call Danny McBride. I'm going to have him shame you. I'll pay for a cameo if I have to. I can't even believe you're saying this. Heresy. Absolute heresy. Okay, explain.
Eastbound and Down's great. It had a very first good episode. I loved the character of Danny McBride and Kenny Powers. I loved what he embodied and his downfall from grace and all the storylines. But look, when you're in this kind of competition at the quality of shows, you're an A-tier show. These are S+ tier shows that we're about to talk about. You know, A- between this and Chad Powers, because Chad Powers is my third. The other two are some of the greatest sports shows ever filmed, end to end.
See, we're going to disagree on Ted Lasso, because I think season 1 of Ted Lasso, I have Ted Lasso third, and you probably have it higher than third. I thought that Ted Lasso was really great in season 1. I thought season 2 was worse than season 1. Season 3 was worse than season 2. I became less and less engaged as we went on. I remember in season 3.
Season 1.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And that's why it's ahead of Chad Powers for me.
Okay.
But like Ted Lasso, like season 1 was great, but for me, the whole show wasn't that's what I was really trying to say. It wasn't like the mountain moving show that a lot of people felt Ted Lasso was. I really enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it more than my number 2 show, Friday Night Lights, or my number 1 show, which you've already raised, which is Eastbound and Down. For me, it's easy. It's an easy number 1. And Friday Night Lights is an easy number 2. And they couldn't be more different, right? Eastbound and Down is a full-on comedy. Friday Night Lights is a full-on drama. You have Coach Taylor. You have Tammy Taylor, played by Connie Britton. You have Matt Saracen and Tim Riggins and so many other great performances over 5 full seasons. It actually, as I was thinking about it, I was like, John and I need to do a rewatch and pot about this, because it was one of the greatest sports shows ever.
It may be the best pilot ever filmed. If you watch that very first episode end to end,
certainly Sports Pilot.
Sports Pilot, yes, but it could be on a Mount Rushmore of TV pilots. I will say that. I will die on that hill. But then on top of that, in the very first season, sorry, this show's 15 years old now. Like, if you haven't watched it yet, please go watch it. You will not be doing yourself a disservice, or you do yourself a disservice by not doing it.
If you don't, yeah.
They win the state championship in the first season, and my thought is, well, where do they go from there? Because obviously they weren't going to win it. That's going to be the challenge. No, every season is better. Every season introduces new characters. Like Michael B. Jordan, you may have heard of him, comes in season 3. And yes, he was in The Wire prior to that, but that's really what kickstarted him. And then Jesse Plemons, of all people.
Huge.
And he was like this
everywhere now. He's everywhere.
Everywhere. Civil War, the complete opposite of what he was. His Breaking Bad character, the complete opposite of who he played as Landry. Like, that cast of characters was just incredible, and end to end, just an incredible show with great drama. Although season 2 has some weird, odd things, but you know, once you get through the oddities there, I think that was a writer's strike season. Things get back on the rails, and it's just end to end nails.
All right, so are you Friday Night Lights 1, Ted Lasso 2, Chad Powers 3, or are you Friday Night Lights 2, Ted Lasso 1?
Friday Night Lights 1, Ted Lasso 2,
Okay.
Chad Powers 3. And I'm really excited to see where we go with Chad Powers. Because of the nature of filming, they're probably not going to be able to film. They use Sanford Stadium to do their stadium filming. They do a lot of stuff on campus around universities. That tells me that they're filming around spring break, and kind of in the summertime when those areas are empty and they could put the extras in. So, you know, like Glenn Powell, he's everywhere. He has you know, a movie coming out right around the corner that he's doing press tour, Running Man, another Richard Bachman book. If you're a friend of the pod, you know, we like Richard Bachman books, The Long Walk.
Absolutely.
Stephen King. Although, so like, he's doing a bunch of stuff. I already mentioned Top Gun Maverick, Twisters, like he's in everything right now. So getting on his filming schedule is brutal. Now, the nice thing is they probably do all of their stadium filming at once for the season, and then everything else they can kind of film as they go with limited sets. I imagine it's not an expensive production to do, but my guess is we don't get season 2 until next fall.
No, and why would they, right? I think it would be stupid for them to launch it in the spring.
Because that cliffhanger, man, I want it.
I know, but just like the end of a college football season, you're left on a cliffhanger and you've got to wait until the next one to see what comes, right? And I think, hopefully they can get to 8 episodes and keep them as tight and as, richly packed with great storylines as they did with season 1. But I do think we're going to be waiting for season 2. And that brings us to the last segment of this discussion, which are season 2 questions and prognostications. I essentially have 5 questions, and one of them has a couple of sub-questions that I want to run through. We don't have to answer these. If you have thoughts or questions on these questions, we can dive into that. But really, these are left for season 2 to answer. So my first set of questions, does Chad finish the regular season? And if so, do the Catfish make the playoffs and contend for a national championship? I tend to think they will.
I have a counter question that will inform this. Do they beat Georgia in that regular season game?
Oh, that's a great question.
Because if they're
no, right, I think it would be too much of it, and they won't be out of the playoff if they lose to Georgia. They can always write that storyline.
But that's where my thing is then their backs are against the wall. Their only loss is to Georgia at Georgia. They have a quality loss, even if it's a blowout. You could argue if they run the table the rest of the way, even if they don't make the SEC championship game, and then you could do the cheap, they're going to play the SEC championship game against Georgia, and the winner's going to go to the playoff, and now they have to beat Georgia.
Yeah.
But if they're doing a Kitsy sports show, they want to play Georgia in the playoff for Chad to redeem himself. Obviously, probably the national championship.
Right.
I mean, no, this team doesn't have what it takes to win the national championship. Like, it's great that they have a good quarterback, but he also has been out of the league for 8 years. They're playing B-tier competition that, they're ranked in the teens when they
I mean, in fairness, John, Chris Weinke won a national championship for the Florida State Seminoles when he was 28 years old because he went to minor league baseball for so long. And then he ended up getting drafted to the Carolina Panthers, where he has the ignominious distinction of losing, I think, his first 12 games as a starter and going 1-15 in his first season. Not a great NFL quarterback.
Okay, so there's
but
precedent.
It has happened that somebody like 8 years later from what their normal college window would be plays well and wins some hardware.
Well, and we've shown that he can ball out, right? Like, that was the question I had coming in is 8 years later, does he still have it? And again, Danny asks the question for the viewers, and Russ is like, well, we'll find out. And then turns out he does. And he was scared in that first episode and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But no, I think they make the playoff. I think they lose to Georgia. I think he finishes the regular season, but there's going to be all of this heightened scrutiny. And there's going to be more cracks in the facade on the road to season 2. Now, it's kind of cheating because the showrunner said he wants to do 3 seasons. He knows Chad would theoretically run out of an eligibility. They can't have this show go on forever. They want to do 3 tight seasons. So get through that and then see where it goes from there.
All right. So second question. In the course of season 2 specifically, does Ricky come to forgive Chad, or do they become low-key enemies?
Well, they're going to be enemies for the bulk of season 2. Something's going to come at the end of season 3 that shows, because Ricky still thinks of Chad and Russ Holiday as that guy from Oregon who has now betrayed her father and basically put a sword above her father's neck that could drop at any time. Like, if Russ does something stupid as Chad that gets them exposed, now Ricky and Coach Hudson they're done. And they'll never coach again, and all of their legacy is toast. And she's going to hate him for that. And
I believe that she will come back around. Doesn't 100%. Happen in season 2, and it sounds like you don't believe that it will. You believe that season 2 is going to be adversarial, and then season 3.
Something will happen at the end that'll start that path down the right way at the end of season 2 is what I think. And season 3 is, well, there will be, maybe they become an item, maybe they don't. I hope they don't, because it would be cliche if they did.
It would. Too much. Would like to see them just get to a point where they have a good working relationship and they have an understanding. Third question with sub-questions. What form does Jerry's revenge take in season 2? Does he sabotage Chad? Does good win out over evil? And Jerry comes back around and does something to help Chad? Does Jerry transfer? Does Jerry leave the program? And then in season 3, Jerry all of a sudden is coming back with, another team and he knows the playbook and all of these things. Maybe he comes back with a team with a killer defense, but a crappy offense. and it's all about, the secrets that Jerry shared. What do you think happens with Jerry's revenge?
Well, he's a fifth-year player, so he's out of eligibility. So
you're right. You're right.
But he could go be like a coaching assistant or something for Georgia or for a rival team in the SEC. That now he has the playbook and all of that, and it's kind of like in Ted Lasso when Nick goes to Tottenham, Spurs, yeah, and it could be something like that. That's kind of where my brain goes there. But I think ultimately Jerry's going to try and sabotage Chad. The question is, how close is Jerry going to get to finding out Chad is Russ, and then is it this dilemma of does Jerry burn everything down?
Me before we, right? And if Jerry is put in that position, couldn't have a better character for it, because what would Tim Tebow do? People used to actually ask that question. What would Tim Tebow do? Right?
I remember that phase. Yeah.
Tim Tebow. All right. So, fourth question now. We've got two more. Does Coach Hudson survive season 2, or does Tricia fire him before season 2 is over?
What would have to be true for a coach that had a 5-0 start and brought credibility and a spotlight to a college to get fired at this stage? They would have to drop at this point like 3 games in a row, starting with the Georgia game and then losing 2 games to really inferior competition like a Northwestern and a UCLA type competition. What kind of buyout do we think he has? Do you think it's like $45 million?
I see that you know me so well. That's where I was going with it. Like, can we get a, next coach fired storyline next year? And like Steve Zahn is a guy, but you could have Steve Zahn be fired and then he could go to another school and become an adversary. There are a lot of things that you could do with that, but I think it would be really fun to have Tricia do like a "you're fired" scene, and or backs a Brinks truck. Like the coach comes out one day and there's a Brinks truck outside of his house and she said, "Your money's inside, don't come back to the building." Something like that. Like, I don't know. I think, nobody could pull off the dramatic flair of a firing as much as the Tricia character.
It would have to be an off-season, we're firing you to bring in Nick Saban or something like that. Like to bring in a high profile college head coach that can elevate the program. Like they fall short in the playoff, or they just narrowly miss the playoff on the last week of the season. But now that they have Chad, it's an alluring program to go coach for. And so it's something like that. But ultimately, if we think they're going to make the playoff, like we talked about in your question 1, there's no way a coach that makes the playoff gets fired, right?
Yeah, right? You think not. That's fair. And I guess, knowing that the showrunners have said there will be 3 seasons, my last question of, Chad's hypothesis on the ripple effects of him being outed. I was going to say in season 2, but in season 2 or season 3, do you think, not just does he get outed, he has to get outed at some point, but do all of the fears come to fruition, including the death penalty for the program for having knowingly done this?
I don't think it'd be the death penalty. I think they bring up the death penalty as the most scary thing.
And for people who don't follow college football, they don't even understand what the death penalty is and what happened with SMU back in the day and all of that. And there's too much background for us to go into, but it's a very well-placed reference. And I think it carries an appropriate amount of weight.
Right. I think they would, in today's day and age with all of the random stuff we've seen and slaps on the wrist, they'd probably be bowl ineligible for a few years, and then they'd probably lose some scholarships, and then, hey, they probably brought a bunch of money to SEC and ratings, and it's a fun storyline that everybody would mop up. And look, follow the money. There's a lot of money in this Chad Power storyline in this universe, and I think that would lend a lot of credence to it.
Absolutely.
The question is, would Russ then be able to go play even in the XFL if he was unmasked?
You gotta imagine not. Maybe in the CFL.
You think
maybe in the CFL?
You think the CFL's above the XFL in your ranking?
Yeah, absolutely.
But he wouldn't play in the XFL, but he would play in the CFL. Like it'd be the other way, right?
I don't think Canada. I mean, I think he's had too many felonies. I don't think Canada would allow him across the border.
Touche.
So
it's
probably why he hasn't gone to the CFL, for being honest.
Well, he has a DUI. They mentioned that in the first episode.
Yeah, he does. Which, in fairness, as we talked about his financial struggles, that helps because he's not paying for insurance. All right, John, those are all my season 2 questions. Do you have any last questions or thoughts before we jump off?
I just can't wait to get this season 2. I'm really excited to see where they go from here. There's so many different directions. And again, the production, the way they get real schools. I want to see who, like, I would love to see what the rest of their schedule is because I'm a schedule nerd. Even in the NFL, I'm looking at, like, well, they have these 3 teams and then they're going to have these two. Like, do they have Bama? Do they have Florida?
Yeah, appointment viewing. Yeah, absolutely. I think for a lot of college football fans, to your point, if they showed a schedule at one point and people knew that there were going to be those scenes coming up, like there are a lot of people that would get engaged because of their passion for their alma mater and just seeing it once, right? Reminds me of the year that I bought Madden strictly because the Oregon Ducks were in there with, an alumni team, right? I bought it for that reason that year and played it for that reason and then stopped playing it once I had my fill. But yeah, no, I think it'll be interesting. John, I can't thank you enough for the time. It's going to be a long wait, but hopefully it will be worth it. We deserve to have great sports shows in our lives, and this is one. Thank you everybody for listening. We hope you all have a great night. And if you haven't watched Chad Powers and all these spoilers didn't burn you out on it, go watch the show. It's awesome.
Well worth it. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Cheers, John.